before we get into the tribulations of the Afro-Latin Caribbean Man, and that's a great that's a great title. I love the subheader as well. Um, you talk about how important this work is, and how meaningful the work is, and how significant it is. And I'm just wondering, as you've spent these 16 hours, as you've made countless sacrifices. You got me stumbling, bumbling, and hiccuping because I'm just taking in the gravity of the work that you're doing and have done. I sit back and ask this question, maybe as others are thinking it themselves. Where do you find the time, the strength, the focus? Because so much of what you do is, a labor of love, and is a very challenging and arduous and difficult task to complete. And as we'll get into the book and other things, people will see that you have an indomitable spirit. But I'm just wondering, as a mere mortal miscreant, how in the world do you find the strength and the fortitude and the veracity, sagacity to do what you do so brilliant?
My brother, let me tell you. I first of all, I think it starts with one, I want to do good, and two, I love what I do. I mean, in doing, when you love something that you're doing, it's not as taxing. It's more taxing on the family than it is on me. In that there are a lot of things that we can't do because of the change in profession that I've made, etc., that we could do before, well, we can't do anymore. But that said, how do I find the time? Well, the truth is that I don't have, how should I say this? I don't have much of a life in the last few years other than this, right? And the thing, and like I said, it's a good thing that I like what I'm doing. I've had a great life I mean, my high school days, my college days, being an activist in college, and when I worked the 5 years I worked for corporate America, and when I worked doing my software engineering, I loved each facet of my life. I loved, right? And what I'm doing now, I love as well. Now, I wish I had a bit more time, but that requires me to get a little bit more funding that I don't have. In this space, it's
Yeah,
very, very hard to get funding, right? So it
yeah.
turns out that a lot of things that I could otherwise have offloaded to others, well, I end up doing it myself. And there's just a finite amount of time in the day, as you well know.
Yes, absolutely. But you find ways to not only add value to the time, but make us aware of really what time it is. Um, as we talked off air, you talked about the critical nature of now and what's going on and what's happening. And I think your book, while it is, a look into many of the historical dynamics of your existence, and how you relate and correlate in society, I also thought it was a wonderful microcosm, if you will, of what we're experiencing in our society at large. So many people are trying to find a new way, a new space, and create a new aspect of how they are looked at and looked upon and treated. We are in Pride Month, and many people are expanding their understanding and their awareness and their appreciation of others that were typically subjugated to, the rungs of subculture, deviant culture, things of that nature. And, they had to go through that ostracization. So we're seeing a transformation, if you will, of people beginning to assert their greater rights and their greater understandings of those rights being enacted and expressed. And I'm just wondering, as you wrote this book and as the work that you're doing is, bringing a new frontier, if you will, or blazing a trail and trailblazing at the same time. I'm wondering, what insights have you gained? And then also what wisdom can you share with us for us to better understand what's really going on?
I'm going to give one word first of all, and that is not being afraid of being vulnerable.
Mm.
And if you're not afraid of being vulnerable, that opens you up to learning a hell of a lot. And I can tell you that I have this phrase that I use that I say I can learn from a 5-year-old or I can learn from an 80-year-old. It
Mhm.
doesn't really matter. I try whenever I have communications with anybody, whenever I have communications with you, whenever I have communicate, I make sure that I try to learn something. And somebody can always ask me, okay, you always say that you can learn from everybody. What did you learn from that person or that kid? And they would be astounded that actually have I generally have an answer at the tip of my tongue that I'd said, oh, I got an insight into this, or I learned this, or whether it's active or passive, there's something that I try to get out of that communication. And I tell you what, I think it is having that door a bit open. I don't know if in the book where I talk about being on the flight to China, where I made that change, that change the the way that I was. I
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
you know, so I mean, opening your mind up to learn is the most important thing, and not being scared to be wrong. You
Mm,
know, I
mm,
I don't have a problem being wrong, and I don't have a problem somebody correcting me because I know the next time I'll get it right.
mm.
And I can actually be a conduit for that person who actually corrected me. I tell that to women all the time. In my sexist days, right? They were sexist, and there was a time when women would just let things pass by,
Mm.
and they know better than you do, and they just let it pass by. Well, women, I love the millennial and the Gen Z generation right now because they don't let anything pass by. And
Mm.
in several of the organizations that I've been a part of, these women made me know that rather quickly. And it was a learning experience and a well-deserved learning experience.
Mm, wow, wow, well said. And I think on this learning experience and this journey that you've been on, and I'm ascertaining this and hopefully ascribing this right to you based on what I read in the book is, your willingness to stand up for those who are sometimes downtrodden and discriminated upon, and even when you face the brutal force that comes with discrimination and disrespect and stereotypes. Because I can fondly recall when I read in the book how one of your professors, and I use that term loosely because I don't know if a professor should operate this way, tried to castigate you and reproof you and make you feel less than, if you will, which you did not allow about a word. And then, in your great understanding and courage, you ask your fellow colleagues and students in the class if they knew what the word was, and they didn't know. So then you gave the professor a lesson on how to better understand his or her students and then to teach what that word meant so that everyone could gain and gain the understanding. Now, I bring that up and I want people to read it in the book because I think it's beautiful how you did that. You didn't take it personal, but you used your personage to help the public good, if you will. Those in the course and the Commonwealth benefited from you turning ignorance into enlightenment and greater intelligence for the whole. And I'm speaking that because I think that that's a beautiful template for what we all must learn. Because in this time, in this age of cantankerism and contention and derision and divisiveness, you found a way to take something that was ugly and turn it into a beautiful, teachable moment. So I'd love for you to enlighten us on how you were able to turn that dark, bleak moment into a moment of brilliance.
I never, the one thing that professor did is made sure that I would never forget the word interstitial. Okay.
That's right. That's right.
I would
I can't wait.
never,
I
ever
can't wait till you
forget
said
that
that.
word interstitial because when I raised my hand and I said, uh, what is interstitial? And he embarrassed me in front of the class. You don't know what it is. And then the class started to laugh. And I turned around and I asked each one of them, what is it? No one could answer. And then the professor finally realized that, well, just maybe. But the thing about it is this, as said, um, I grew up. I went to the University of Texas in the 80s.
Mm,
The University of Texas had been integrated for some time before that, but it was in the 80s. And there is still that thing where, folks that are in engineering that have my pigmentation, they think that I'm there for a numerical reason and not for the intellect.
mm,
So these teachers took a whole lot of liberties in the way they talk to you or thought about you. And what I remember is this: my parents, I had great parents, and these guys taught me that I was no better than anybody else. But by the same token, nobody else was better than I am. So even as I felt that sting at UT academically,
mm,
it never fazed me that somehow those other kids, even though most of them were more wealthy than I was because I wasn't, right?
mm.
That somehow they were better. So it gave me that extra um, liberty, if you will, or freedom to challenge these professors. What are they going to do to me? I mean,
Mm.
I never ever, like I said, I've always been nice, but at that time I did have a chip on my shoulder, one that I pretty much lost now. And growing, as you grow, you learn how sometimes a chip on the shoulder may be good for you, but it may not be good for the process. So you
Mm.
learn how to modify your behavior as you get older, right? But then I would take nothing from, I would take nothing. I'm telling you, you touch me and it would be hell. In corporate America, it was the same. But as I grew older, you learn how uh, to do things a bit more efficiently, better.
Yeah, definitely. Without losing integrity. And I
Right.
think that's very important. You understood uh, the significance of keeping your constitution that's true to yourself.
Right.
I'm wondering this, being a Black Panamanian, and
Right.
someone who is well aware of your cultural uh, background and
Hmm.
and distinctly keen on how valuable and important that is. Can you give us, or from your perspective, some insights on those who come to this country? Because many times, we see um, these reels or we see these conversations that people have, and even today, discussions about the border and immigrants and these terms that are being thrown out that I won't use today to disparage those seeking for a better life, if you will, and then the discussions around that. So much of it is polarized, so much of it is politicized, and I'd like someone who can talk about all of those things, but first deal with the personage coming to a new country, coming to a new experience, coming from a place that may be vastly different than the place that you are here now. What is that like, and what were you able to find out about yourself that gave you the wherewithal to be here right now?
I get it. I tell you what. First of all, uh, I tell something to everybody, whether they be a Black Panamanian or any immigrant that's coming over here, and for that matter, every Black person that previous to, I don't remember which amendment it is, 14th or 13th,
Yeah.
wasn't even considered a citizen, right? I always I always preface it to say, do not let anybody take away your right to be here or your ownership of being here. And what I mean by that is um, the only reverence that I have to any person here are to the natives who beat us all here.
Mm.
So therefore, I will not allow myself to feel inferior or to let those who think they're more American than I am to really feel they're more American than I am or anything of that nature. Said, you are just as an American as I am, just as that other immigrant that went through the process to naturalize. And to put it bluntly, at least those of us that are coming over here are not coming over here to conquer, pilfer, or do anything to these folks. Most of us are coming over here for a job, coming over here to get an education. And for those who said, well, you're coming to my country to get that, I remind folks that as Americans and the tentacles of America goes throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, and a lot of what's made here comes from there. And thus, those who are able to migrate here should feel that that they're doing nothing more than the standard migration that we do and that America's businessmen and otherwise and others have done. That said, I want to say there's a story that I alluded to in the book, and that had to do with when I just got here, Brenham, Texas. And this is going
Yeah.
to sound a bit funny, but when I came here, there was sort of a separation between those with melanin like myself and those with melanin that were born here. In other words, Black Americans, African Americans versus Latino Americans, right? And I didn't let that thing suffice. But when I came here, we are young and you're looking for ladies and all of that. And I
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
these beautiful sisters out there and I wanted to make a play. And I was a bit too weird for them. And the ones who really were interested in this strange speaking kind of guy at that time were the white girls. So those are the ones who I mostly dealt with back, at Blinn in Country Town, Blinn, as well as, of course, some of my Latinas, but we were kind of too close in culture and everybody wanted to try new things, when you come from Latin America and you come over here, that sort of thing. But I kind of got tired of, there are two things that were happening as a Black guy from Panama when I came over here. The older white there's a woman that treated me like her son. She was a white woman that ran the cafeteria, and she tried to steer me away from Black Americans. And I am, I'm. First of all, it never worked in that. I still tried to find a way to get engaged, but she tried to stop that, right? And I didn't understand what the dynamics that was happening in this country. And for a long time, people didn't, or a lot of folks don't get it. If you can create a separation between, let's say, the Latin Black folks and the born American Black folks, you actually create a system where you still maintain control. Believe it or not, of both. So I never forgot. I wasn't quite able to articulate those things back then because again, you're young, you're 19 years old or so. But I remember it started when I went to the University of Texas. And I went to the University of Texas and the first thing I saw was the Afro-American Culture Committee. And I wanted to be a part of it. So I jumped into the school and I went up there and I got in, and even though I was kind of spoken to with a little bit of suspicion, because again, that accent and that sort of stuff. And I don't know if you know, but at UT, like Nigerians and all of that would isolate themselves or whatever. But I always believe in that kind of inclusive thing, right? So I remember going to one of these meetings and the folks telling me, we're listening to Martin Luther King. Those things used to come on long plays, LPs, and we put on the LP and we're listening to Martin Luther King's speech. And when we got into talking, I said, yeah, I like Martin Luther King, but I'm really, I really have an affinity for Malcolm X. And they didn't like that I said that. And they exploded on me and they started calling me, you're not one of us anyway, you're a damn import, and all these kinds of things they're telling me, right? So I finally got fed up and I said, let me tell you guys something, okay? No Black person in this hemisphere came on a pleasure ship, right? It's just a matter of where the ship stopped, how we speak. So I speak Spanish and I speak English with a Caribbean twang. You know why? because the ship stopped in Jamaica and Barbados and those places where my forefathers are from, and in Panama, where my people are now. That's the only difference. But the truth of the matter is we're the same. So don't call me an import or try to use the we're Americans on me, because you and I have quite a bit in common, more so than you're likely to realize. And it was that kind of a fight that I had at UT in the beginning. These kids that came up from, I guess I don't know what many of them thought, but I sort of constantly forced myself into not allowing first of all that separation, because I wasn't gonna deal with that. And
Mhm.
and it worked. And then eventually I formed something called the Caribbean Central American Association. I don't know why I call it that, because there were more South Americans in there than anything. I call it Caribbean Central American because I was from Central America, but there are more South Americans in there than anything else, right? So, but that started me to learn a lot of the false racial dynamics that occur in this country. First of
Mm,
all, there really ain't no race, but since we play the racialized game in America, it taught me that everybody plays the racialized game, whether you're black, white, Latino, or Latino not a race, but you get what I'm saying. But all these things. And navigating that is something that I had to do, as you see in my book, both in school, in corporate America, and as I form my own company and work. And to put it bluntly, even where you think it shouldn't happen in liberal spaces,
mm.
and I'll just say it, at KPFT, at Daily Kos, at everywhere else, you find that there's this kind of dynamic that you have to go through.
And you've went through it quite well. As I've witnessed your intelligence, your savvy, and integrity, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, has been something that is quite immaculate and unparalleled. And I think that's why you make such a wonderful spokesperson, or a beautiful example of what we can all become and strive to do, in whatever fashion, whatever facet possible. And the reason why I say that is because you are a uniter. You do work across cultural and ethnic and racial lines to find the commonality, to find the good, to increase and improve the wherewithal and the commonwealth of the collective. And I think now more than ever, we need those kinds of individuals and that kind of understanding to become a part of the consensus of our society. So I'm wondering, and as you mentioned, understanding some of the racial intricacies of this society, what have you gleaned in terms of the underbelly and the underworkings that, as you mentioned, are on pretty much every sphere and aspect of our society? And then how have you not become a victim of those things, if you haven't, but you've used those things in a way in which has caused you to be such a well-respected and well-renowned vocal proponent of I guess, the betterment of our society?
Let me say this. I think one of the things that I realized ultimately is that racism, sexism, homophobia, all the isms is a requirement for the type of economic system that we have. All those things are necessary. And what I mean by that is we have all been looking at the wrong boogie person, right? If I can keep myself and everybody else fighting among groups and first of all, let me first say I 100% believe in identity politics. Until all identities have equal access to success, you have to have identity politics, because each identity have different issues that need to be solved, to make them an equal have equity within our system. Now that said, there is one specific culprit. And if you go through, if for all the racial things that I've gone through in my book, right, there's one culprit that is the master of it all. And that is our economic system and those who run our economic system. Because they depend on us not seeing how flawed it is. And how do we not see how flawed it is if not to be worried about conflicts among each other?
Mm.
So
Mm.
therefore, if I can deconflict problems between black folk and white folk and uh, folks from another part of the world and immigrant, if I can find a way to show the common thread that create dissension among these people, then at that point we can actually hit this plutocracy, this oligarchy that is causing the problems. But we have some limited time here before structures are changed to be able to do this in a peaceful manner. And so, I mean, when you look at where we are today, you asked me this earlier about what's happening today. All of this ties together. You know, none of this stuff is separate. My book, which is about the tribulations of an Afro-Latino Caribbean man, the only reasons we have those tribulations, myself, you said, you have gone through, you could pick that book up. And like I said, that book was written for two groups, the aggrieved and those who are not aggrieved. And notice I didn't say not aggrieved in the manner in which we are, because we're all aggrieved by the system. But some of us are on the lower end of the totem pole. In other words, we are more aggrieved than others. And this book, the person who is more aggrieved is going to pick that book up and say, as a black person, as a Latino person, they're going to say, oh man, I get it. I get it. And for my white brothers and sisters, they're going to look at it and say, oh my God, I didn't know, but I see it now. I didn't know. Then, of course, you have those who are going to say, you're looking at it the wrong way. Wasn't really that wasn't really why you had those issues. But
Mm.
when you add those people who've lived it and those who are sufficiently empathetic with it, that's a majority.
Mm. Wow. I have to ask this question because it was something that just came to me as I was reading through your work. It seems as if this book is still a work in progress, if you will.
Absolutely.
And you don't try to come across as if you have the panacea to ameliorate all of these issues.
No.
But it is very insightful, and I think people would benefit from hearing, reading, and learning from your experience and how that experience has helped shape your work, even as we speak. And as we speak, I know that it's important for people to have these conversations because many times we want to sweep it under the rug and act as if, we can just be ostriches and put our head in the sand and just focus on, who's winning the finals, if you will, or, whatever sporting event is taking our attention. But you make it very clear in your writing that we need to address these issues. And whether we're in the corporate environment, whether we're in the universities and colleges, whether we're in the community working with grassroots organizations, we need to have equity and equality. And then also the opportunity, as you mentioned, for identities to be respected. Why is that so important? And how is that juxtaposition against what some would call a return to making America great, which some would say is a euphemism for a more intolerant and more disrespectful and class stratified society, class and race. Let me make sure I said that.
I mean, no, you're absolutely. I mean, I think you nailed it with that question, right? Make America great makes no sense for anybody that's black, anybody that's Latino, any woman at all. And make America great. In the past, women couldn't vote. In the past, black folks, even though black men had the vote, they really didn't. Uh, Latinos, Chinese. I mean, you look at every other demographic, America has been becoming a better nation But within if you take a look at the Constitution or the founding fathers and all of this, right? To some, it's blasphemy when you talk. If you speak ill will about the people who founded the country, if you speak ill will about some of the people we revere, one of the reasons they're burning, they're wanting to ban books that say certain things right now, is that no longer are we just going to buy the facade of the genesis of this country. Look, America is a great country, not because of its founders, not because of how it started. America is a great country because of the people within America and the changes that were allowed to be made. I cannot call somebody ultimately great who considered me 3/5 of a person, no matter what time, what period of time they were in. I cannot call somebody great who said women couldn't vote. I cannot call somebody great who supported the Trail of Tears. I cannot call somebody great who constantly signed contracts over and over with indigenous folks, and when they find gold or resources on the land, went ahead and denied said contracts. Those are realities. And when you ask everybody to look back in time as that being a great time, or that being a time of a moral time, no, these were very immoral times. And unless we are honest about this, people simply, when you live your life on a lie, when you live your life on hypocrisy, right? That is what you get out of it. And that's why you could get the growth of Donald Trump. When Donald Trump came in and said, we're no longer going to talk about DEI. We're not going to talk about the 1619 project. Instead, we're going to talk about the 1776 project. In other words, let's take away a truth and fill it in with a lie. I mean, these are the things that we have to be cognizant of. And you know what? This isn't a black thing, a white thing, or any other thing. This is just a truth thing. And just like black folks have been harmed by this country, believe it or not, my brothers and sisters in Appalachia right now are a victim of the same thing that I have. Even as it isn't as profound in certain aspects, but they're living in a society where 50% of them are on some side of assistance. But you don't hear about those kinds of things because it doesn't fit a profile that keeps us in our places.
Keeping us in our place. That's a very interesting statement that I think your book expands upon, not only the importance of not allowing people to put you in boxes, but also not allowing yourself to accept boxes and limitations upon your thinking. I think that this is a must read. People have to absorb this information that's in this wonderful book. Brother, I didn't know you had scoliosis. I knew you were a bad man, but I didn't know you had the bionic man. You're a bad man, my brother. You know what I'm saying? So I big salute you and I thank you.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.